only one Democrat in the Senate of the United States had the backbone to vote against this coddling of the Wall Street banksters, and that was your senator and my senator, Russ Feingold from Wisconsin.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thanks so much. Thanks for having the biggest crowd here ever. Thanks for making Bob Fest a great success. And thank you for such a wonderful greeting. I want to thank Laura Flanders for all the wonderful things she said and the things she said about me. Thank you, Laura, very, very much. This is a good time for that kind of encouragement. And Jim Hightower, one of my favorite people, but some of you may not remember that in the early 80s, a number of us, I'm sure a number of us in the room here, together fought something that Monsanto had cooked up called bovine growth hormone that they wanted to stick in our cows. And I needed some help on that cause because they were sending lobbyists up here by the busload and the plane load. But one short guy from Texas came to see one short guy in Wisconsin, and together we fought and beat Monsanto on bovine growth hormone because of Jim Hightower. And about that same time, a courageous man in this state took on an incumbent United States Senator. He took on Bob Caston. And he pointed out the evils of corporate money in politics. And he almost beat him. And he came so close that somebody was able to beat him 6 years later. I am grateful to Ed Garvey for his fight for America and for progressive causes and for what you're doing with Bob Fest, Ed. And after that campaign, Ed wrote an article for The Progressive. And I carried that article with me everywhere I went in the country when I spent 5 years, all over Wisconsin, all over America, making the point that we have to figure out a way to defeat Bob Caston with people and not money. And that article, I quoted it every time, Ed. He talked about the growing evils of the power of money in politics, what he had experienced, what he had seen. And I was starting to see it too. And I experienced it to a degree, of course, in 1992 in that tough race where we finally beat Caston. But we had no idea, Ed or me or anyone else, we had no idea how bad this was going to get. And it was in the early 90s. Yes, under some of those Democrats you were talking about, where the bright idea was cooked up that, well, gee, why don't we let corporations and unions and wealthy individuals give unlimited campaign contributions to the political parties, independent of the campaign finance limits that have been put in place in the early 1970s. This was the beginning of the use of soft money. You remember the no controlling legal authority? Well, there was no controlling legal authority to prevent a corporation from giving $1 million Monday night to the Democrats and $1 million Tuesday night to the Republicans, and then Wednesday have a vote to pass a lousy trade agreement that sends our jobs overseas. That's exactly what happened with the unlimited campaign contributions. This was a growing cancer in our system, particularly in the 1990s, and that's why John McCain and I and others sought to and succeeded in banning those kind of contributions. People say to me, oh, it's too bad about McCain-Feingold being overturned by the Supreme Court. That's the only thing that's still in place now. So what we have now is a law that says that corporations and unions and wealthy individuals can't give unlimited contributions directly to the political parties. The Supreme Court agreed with us, and the right and the corporations were absolutely fit to be tied. They couldn't believe we had actually achieved something on a bipartisan basis for the American people. And they started to plot, and they started to work. And of course, a certain guy named George Bush became president through a vote of the Supreme Court. And they got some judicial appointments. People that came before the Judiciary Committee and promised me under oath that they would follow precedent, that they would be neutral umpires calling balls and strikes. Well, of course, they did the opposite. They took every opportunity they could when it came to the campaign finance laws to destroy everything but the ban that McCain and I got into place. So what did they do? They did the Citizen United's case. Now, just about everybody I talked to who has studied the law believes this is one of the worst decisions in the history of the United States Supreme Court. These people who pledged to follow precedent overturned a law signed by Teddy Roosevelt in 1907, proposed and backed by you-know-who, Fighting Bob La Follette. Fighting Bob. And it's been the law of the land for 100 years that corporations cannot use their treasuries to directly impact elections. It's always been the law for 100 years. 1947, the conservatives weren't very happy that they were the only ones limited, so they managed to get through a provision in the Taft-Hartley Act that said unions couldn't do it either. And so it continued. And it was understood that that was impossible to do in American politics. That's why they were looking for other ways to do it. That's why they wanted to use this soft money scam. Court case after court case after court case reaffirmed that these statutes were valid and a foundation of our system of government. But what did these 5 justices say? They said, oh, actually, we went back and checked with the founders of the country. And the founders apparently believed that corporations were exactly the same as us, that a corporation has every right the same as us, and therefore you cannot restrict their ability to buy elections. That's what they concluded. It is a lawless decision by our highest court. But four justices disputed it, led by John Paul Stevens. A 90-year-old justice, in his last major decision, went up to the bench, and they usually just announce these decisions. He made these guys listen to him for 20 minutes as he summarized his brilliant 80-page decision, disputing that the corporations are the same as us. They are not the same as us. They do not have the same rights as all of us, and that decision is wrong on the law and wrong for America and an enormous danger to the political process as we go forward. Now, it's a Supreme Court. It's a court case. How can you get people to understand and feel what this means for them? Well, I've been amazed at my town meetings. People who I thought would never want to bring up this subject saying, what in the heck was that court decision? Across the board, even Tea Party people think it's a bad decision. And all you got to tell people is this is what it now means. If you go down this street and go into, let's say, a BP gas station, and you buy 10 gallons of gas, that money can now, for the first time in 100 years, be immediately placed on television to defend candidates who defend big oil and big insurance companies and the pharmaceutical industry. That's what it means. I mean, what do they want? They want us to start picking Democrat toothpaste companies and Republican toothpaste companies? That's what we're going to have to do. That's what we're going to have to do if the law says that corporations can use your money to directly influence elections. Now we're trying to do something about this mess. We can only go so far in the Congress because it's a constitutional decision. But we're trying to pass something, and we got 59 votes. We need one more, called the Disclose Act. It's pretty weak tea. It doesn't even deal with the danger of foreign money coming in through this decision. It just says that you should have to disclose who you are. So a Exxon can't say we're the family-friendly people. They have to say they're Exxon. Now, you remember when we did McCain-Feingold, what did Mitch McConnell, the #1 friend of the lobbyists in Washington, according to a recent study, he said, well, Russ, John and Russ, you don't understand. All we need here isn't this law banning soft money. We just need disclosure. Okay. Well, he wouldn't even vote for disclosure in this Disclose Act. But I don't want to kid you. Even if we pass it, it's only a tiny step. We need to overturn this decision. We need to overturn this decision. And that means President Obama needs another appointment either in this term or a second term, or this democracy will head dramatically in the wrong direction. We have got to overturn this decision. And as we strategize to do whatever we can do between now and then to limit the effects of this decision, I want you to know that I am committed to this cause because I think it goes to the very core of our democracy. And it's funny, you probably realize that there are 2 Bob Fests, okay? I know this is the bigger one. They're both in Sauk County. One's in Baraboo, the other one's in Spring Green. One's about a guy from town of Primrose over here. The other one's about a guy from Hibbing, Minnesota. Bob and Bob. 2 greatest inspirations I think I've had in my whole life. Bob LaFollette and Bob Dylan. Now, I intend to be down at that other Bob Fest next year because it's going to be Bob's 70th birthday, Bob Dylan's 70th birthday. All right, I know that's painful, but I want to connect Bob Dylan and Bob LaFollette through the words of Bob Dylan. I think one of the greatest songs Bob Dylan ever wrote, which was never put on an album but was in the legal bootleg album. It's legal. He authorized it. I think it might be CD 3, take 14. The song is called Blind Willie McTell. Good, Blind Willie McTell fans. You know, I went to a Dylan concert here at the Kohl Center a couple of years ago, and you know how does a Dylan concert? You don't realize that one of your favorite songs is being sung till it's 2/3 over. And I go, what song is it? Oh, it's Blind Willie McTell. Well, it's a song that he wrote that is one of the most beautiful pieces I've ever seen about this blues man that he considered a great inspiration. But he had a line in the song that reminds me of the cause that you're here for and the cause that I'm here for and that certainly Bob LaFollette was for. He says, well, God, it is in his heaven, and we all want what's his. But power and greed and corruptible seed seem to be all that there is. That's the world Bob was imagining in post-Reconstruction South. And that's the world that Bob LaFollette confronted in this state in the late 19th century. He came out of this county and said, enough of the railmen and the timbermen dominating and destroying our government. He said, I will lead a progressive movement that will last for well over 100 years, which of course it has done. He saw the power and the greed and the corruption. But I guess even Bob LaFollette would not have been able to imagine the level that we are experiencing today. The power and the greed and the corruption of those Wall Street firms convincing us to sell off our banks, destroying the post-Depression regulations, and now acting as if we really have regulation from that bill we just passed. It doesn't do the job, my friends. It is still a gift to Wall Street. The power and greed and corruption of the oil companies, who worked that Bush-Cheney administration like a charm. It probably wasn't too hard to do, to make sure that they weren't seriously regulated when they are doing deep water drilling. The power and greed and corruption of corporations like the pharmaceutical companies, who jammed through an unpaid-for Medicare Part D that left a big donut hole for seniors and didn't allow us to get our medicines in from Canada. The power and the greed and the corruption of the health insurance industry, who finally have a few restrictions. They can't kick 1 million people off their insurance here in Wisconsin anymore because of pre-existing conditions, but they're running every candidate they can so they can repeal that law. That is beyond belief, and the American people have to resist. In fact, there is no institution in our society that is safe from this corporate greed and corruption. In Congress, it was these big corporations that pushed through those trade agreements, the NAFTA, the GATT, and the China deal that sent our jobs overseas. It was the power and the corruption and greed of the private contractors who loved making money in wars like Iraq and Afghanistan, who advanced notions like the idea that the President of the United States can do whatever he wants, regardless of the acts of Congress. It was the power and greed of these corporations that have come to dominate our media, consolidating messages in a few hands and crushing the voices of everyone else. And now, after they've attacked the media, the Congress, and the executive branch, they have finally managed to corrupt the United States Supreme Court, turning our system of government and our democracy into another example of what is essentially corporate naming rights. My friends, I understand and believe what many people in this country are saying is that too much big government is bad. It is. Government with a heavy hand, as with the Patriot Act, that can look at your library records without any reason at all, is wrong. So too much government power is a danger. But there's one thing that's worse. That is big government completely dominated and controlled by corporate special interests. That is more dangerous. That is the biggest threat to democracy and the rights of the American people. Corporate domination. My friends, we will ultimately win this battle. Just as Bob La Follette did over 100 years ago. We will challenge them tonight. We will challenge them tomorrow in Barrymore. You better believe I need you to challenge them on November 2nd. And we will challenge them every day, every month, every year, till we get our democracy back in the spirit of Wisconsin's motto, forward, forward, forward.